Hello friends, I'm Inu and welcome to Travel Wild India, a YouTube channel dedicated to avid wilderness explorers and wildlife enthusiasts across India who love traveling to different wildlife sanctuaries, national parks and tiger reserves spread across our beautiful country. Now, if you are that person, who loves traveling to the jungle 3 to 4 times a year, maybe a little less, and you're looking for that one zoom lens that will help you get those beautiful shots of tigers and birds while you're doing your jungle safari, I will try my best to help you suggest 5 such value for money zoom lenses that will not break your bank but still help you get those beautiful results which you can share with your friends, send to different exhibitions, and just watch them later and get mesmerized over them. At number 5, the Sigma 150 to 600 mm f5 to 6.3 contemporary lens. Why you should buy this lens? First, the focal range. It is a 150 to 600 mm lens, which coupled with an APS-C or a crop sensor Nikon body is equivalent to around 900 to a 960 mm on a Canon body. That focal range is huge. Second good point about this lens is it's available on Amazon India at a price of around 62,000 rupees. For that price, this lens does offer a lot. That kind of focal range with at around just 62,000 rupees is very good value for money. The third pro about this lens is at 1.9 kgs, this lens is not very heavy. It's not light, certainly, but it's not very heavy. The fourth pro about this lens is its compatibility. It's a Sigma lens which does come in Canon and Nikon mounts. So if you have a Canon body or a Nikon body, you can buy this lens in any of the configurations and you're good to go. Now, the fifth pro about this lens is it has decent image quality. It may not be the sharpest or the most contrasty lens around, but the image quality is not bad. It's okay-ish. Now, the points that are not so good about this lens. Number 1, the build quality. Sigma lenses tend to be a little flimsier compared to Tamrons and definitely the more professional Nikon and Canon lenses. And that is no different with this lens. This lens does not feel built to last in your hand. This lens has a better built version with way better weather sealing and things like that. That is the 150 to 600 mm sport version of the Sigma lens, but that is way more expensive. That comes at around 1,30,000 to 1,70,000. I've seen that lens sell for 1,70,000 on Amazon India. That amount of price, the optical clarity of the contemporary and the sport lens are almost similar. Hardly any different. So you're just paying that double amount for build quality. So I think that is definitely not good value for money. So considering that, this lens, contemporary lens, is not the best built lens that you can buy at this price. Second con about this lens is the sharpness at the longest zoom ranges, say 600 on a full frame body or 900, 960 on an APS-C or a crop sensor body is not desirable. This lens does have a lot of sharpness issues at the longer focal ranges. Number 3, which is not so good about this lens, and that is common with all third-party lenses, these are not the fastest focusing lens that you can couple with your Canon or Nikon bodies. For that, you have to go for first-party Canon or Nikon lenses. This is not the fastest focusing lens, even if you have a dual pixel autofocusing system of the Canons or the very advanced Nikon autofocusing systems that are coming with the latest Nikon bodies. You will not get the optimum results out of your camera bodies if you're using this lens. The last con about this lens is, since this is a f5 to 6.3 lens, this is not very fast, and the image stabilization on this lens leaves a lot to be desired. This is no way as good as compared to Nikon's or the class-leading image stabilization you can get on Canon lenses. So when and in Indian jungles, when you're traveling on a gypsy, it's very difficult to mount a tripod and always because tripod restricts your movement. You cannot move like this with the tripod always, because you never know where you spot wildlife. So for that scenario, I don't think this is a very fast lens, because image stabilization is not class leading, which does not help you get good shutter speeds. Because when you are shooting at around a focal length of say 960, at least a minimum shutter speed of 1000 of a second is required, even if you have the steadiest hands. Yeah, this is not the fastest lens. At number 4, we have the Tamron 18 to 400 mm lens. Now, this is a controversial choice, but I had to choose this lens because I've used it pretty many times and it's good. Why you should consider buying this lens? Number 1, the price. This lens is available for around 49,000 on Amazon India, and it should be available at a lesser price locally. For that amount of money, this lens offers you a lot. The second good point about this lens is the focal range. It's an 18 to 400 mm lens. That means you get a lot more flexibility when you're shooting. When you're in the jungle or anywhere else, I mean, you're not only shooting wildlife, you're shooting landscapes, you're shooting people around you, and it's not always that you're only going to a jungle. You might just visit a few cities around, few towns around. So this lens has this capability of adjusting to all your needs. So 18 to 400 is almost bridge camera like focal range. I mean, coming to bridge cameras, we can explain that in another video. So the focal range is very, very versatile. Okay, on the longer range, it's not as long as 600, but 400 is not bad. When you couple it with an APS-C or crop sensor body, it does give you 600 to 640 mm at the top range. The third good point about this lens, it's the weight of the lens. This lens just weighs 710 grams. Now, when you're doing those long jungle safaris, carrying those heavy, large lenses can get tiresome at times. And this lens, it's a delight to use. It's just 710 grams and it feels nothing compared to those heavy lenses. So you're never losing your comfort zone ever. And the next pro about this lens is sharpness. This lens, for a very, very commercial, budget-oriented zoom lens, this lens is very, 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 very sharp. Incredibly sharp. It does tend to lose a bit of sharpness at the longest focal ranges, but even then, for this price and this range, I would any day adjust that little bit for this kind of sharpness. And finally, this lens is a decently built lens. It comes with a metal mount, and as with all of the Tamron lenses, feels built to last. So that is good enough. Now, points that are not so good about this lens. The longest focal range that you can get with this lens is just 400 mm. 400 mm is not always enough when you're in Indian jungles or shooting birds, things like that. So that 400 mm maximum focal range is a little restrictive. The second not so good thing about this lens, this is a crop sensor camera lens only, so you cannot pair it with your full frame body. That is a big con about this lens. So it can only be fitted to APS-C and crop sensor bodies. Third con about this lens is this lens cannot be fitted with a long lens hood. This lens does come with a lens hood in the box, but since the focal range is from 18 to 400, you cannot use a longer lens hood because that would crop your frames at the wider focal lengths like 18 and things like that. So at very, very long focal ranges, say 400, you might see a bit of direct sunlight coming into your frame, and that is not avoidable. The next con about this lens is this lens tend to have a bit of chromatic aberration and purple fringing at the longer focal ranges. But if you are shooting raw, you should always shoot raw. If you're working with wildlife, you should never ever shoot JPEGs. You should always shoot on raw. But those things can be corrected with one single click on Adobe Lightroom. So if you're okay with Lightroom, just go ahead. I mean, purple fringings and chromatic aberrations will not be a problem at all. The next and final con, this lens has a rotating front end. So fixing circular polarizing filters, CPLs, is a problem with this lens because you cannot adjust them if your lens lens head is rotating always. You would know what I'm saying. So that is the final con about this lens. At number 3, it's not just one single lens but a combination of a lens and an extender. It's a Canon 7200mm f2.8 IS2 USM L lens coupled with a Canon 2.0x extender. Now, why you should consider buying this lens? First, optical quality. The photographs that come out of this lens will scream quality, be it sharpness, contrast, bokeh, and everything else about this lens is superb. That 2.8 fixed aperture does give you, just let in a lot of light. Okay, when you couple it with an extender, it becomes a 5.6 aperture lens, but since this lens is a very clear, bright lens, the optical clarity richness will be, amazing. The second pro about this lens is the flexibility. Since it's a combination of an extender and a lens, you can always feel like you're having two lenses. When you couple with an extender, you have an f150 to 400 or 440mm f5.6 lens, and when you just use the lens, you have a 7200mm f2.8 lens. Now, when you're traveling to Africa or places where you don't need that amount of focal reach, there in Africa, when you have to fit a whole giraffe into your frame, those 150 to 600 or 200 to 500 lenses will not always fit in your giraffe. For that, the 70 to 200mm focal range coupled with that f2.8 speed is phenomenal. You'll get insane results out of this combination. In Africa, you tend to see spot wildlife a little closer on average to what you spot in India. So that is a big advantage of this. Other than that, that 7200 lens can be used for fashion, for product, for your family weddings and vacations, and anything else apart from great wildlife photography coupled with that extender. Third pro about this lens, it's a Canon L lens. The build quality is class leading. It's no comparison with other third-party lenses and even some other Nikon lenses of this range. This is built to last, and it'll last generations for you. The final pro, this lens will give you quality that you can compare easily with way more expensive prime lenses like the 300mm f2.8 prime or the 400mm f4 prime. So this is one lens that you can use for weddings, videos, anything else, and this will give you best results. Points that are not so good about this lens, of course, the focal range. It's a 7200mm lens at the end of the day. Even if you couple it with an extender, it's still a 400mm lens or 440mm lens. And at this moment, Canon does not have too many good APS-C bodies because 80D is showing age, 70 Mark II, even that is showing age and is about to be replaced in a year or so time. So at this moment, if you already have a Canon body, go ahead and buy this lens and just wait for those new Canon APS-C bodies to come out so that you can replace your body as well. But if you are planning to invest on a body and a lens at this moment, buying a full frame camera for wildlife photography, I would not advise that, though you get terrific bokeh on full frame cameras. But that reach, that reduction in reach can actually hamper. Many people actually talk about cropping. I don't find cropping to be the best solution for photographs. I'll explain all that in another video, but cropping for me is just a half-hearted solution. The next con about this lens is the extender does not autofocus or function as smoothly with every other Canon lens or third-party lenses. So that will kind of restrict your usage of the extender to only a few Canon lenses that will perform actually at its best when coupled with an extender. The third con about this lens or this combination of lens and extender is, of course, the price. The lens costs around 1 lakh 40-ish thousand on Amazon India and 1,30,000 I think, and the extender costs a further 49,000. So that is pretty expensive. But again, just like I told you, prime lenses, the 400mm, 500mm, 600mm, they are way more expensive, 2 times to 3 times more expensive than this lens, and this lens will give you almost the same optical quality that you can get out of those lenses. At number 2, we have the Nikon 200 to 500mm f5.6 lens. Why you should buy this lens? Focal range 200 to 500 mm on a first party Nikon lens is blessing. So 500 means when coupled with a Nikon crop sensor body, it's 750 mm. So that is pretty long a range, though not as long as comparable Sigma or Tamron lenses. This is still a very good focal range. Second pro about this lens, focusing. When you're using this lens coupled with the new Nikon D500 or even the D750, the focusing speed you get with this combination is way ahead of anything else that you can even think of, because the latest Nikon cameras, they are very good. The sensors are class leading, focusing speed is unparalleled. Though I tend to prefer Canon lenses over Nikons, and that 7200 Canon, just I told, even that has terrific image stabilization. So does this one. So next pro about this lens is its image stabilization. This lens can easily give you 4 to 5 stops benefit with its superb image stabilization, or VR, what Nikon calls it. So you can get decent high shutter speeds when you are handhelding this lens and you're shooting your subject from a gypsy. The next pro about this lens is when coupled with a full frame Nikon body, say the 850D, D850 or D810, the bokeh you get out of this lens is very good. Very good bokeh. I mean, considering it's just a 5.6 max aperture lens, the bokeh that you get from this lens is very good. Next pro and the final pro about this lens is the image quality. The sharpness, the contrast, the richness throughout the focal range of this lens is pretty good. It does not fall suddenly like the Sigma at the very top range of the focal range. So optically, this lens is a sound lens. Now the points that are not so good about this lens. First point, this only works with Nikon bodies. It cannot be fitted to your Canon body, so only if you have a Nikon body you can consider this lens. If you are on a Canon ecosystem or a Sony ecosystem, you just cannot use this lens. The next con about this lens is, though this lens is decently sharp, this is not the sharpest lens that you can buy at this price range. The next con, the price. This lens is priced around 85 to 90,000, and for that the Sigma does offer better focal range at a considerably lower price, though not a little sacrifice on the optical front. And Tamron does have the better focal ranges as well, and optically is kind of debatable which one is better. Before you think that Canon might just be the rank 1 amongst the 5 lenses, no, I do not like the Canon 100 to 400 L lens, zoom lens at all, because I've used that lens many a times. I've rented it, I've borrowed it from friends. That lens does not give you very good optical quality. I mean, the results that come out of that lens are very comparable to lenses that are priced way lower than that lens. That is 1,40,000 rupees lens, and for that you're just getting build quality of Canon L lens. Apart from that, optically that lens is not very good, and also the focal range is just 100 to 400. So I do not like that lens personally. So if you're trying to get a Canon, just get it 70 to 200 and couple with an extender if you want to get way better results. Now coming to number 1, it is the Tamron 150 to 600 mm f5 to 6.3 G2 lens. Why you should buy this lens? Of course, the focal range 150 to 600, as I already told, for the Sigma is a very good focal range, and that coupled with APS-C bodies or crop sensor bodies, you get 900 to 600 960 mm, which is terrific. Second good point about this lens is the flexibility. It can become combined with a Nikon body, a Canon body, or even a Sony E-mount body. Sony mirrorless cameras. Sony is making some very good mirrorless cameras in the recent times, but their lens lineup is not up to the market. They have some good lenses, but they are exorbitantly priced. Since this lens can be paired also with Sony mirrorless bodies, I'll give this lens some extra brownie points. The third pro about this lens is this lens has got decent image stabilization, way better when you compare it to Sigma lenses, the contemporary lens. Not as good as the Canon IS or the Nikon VR, but this image stabilization is decent enough. The fourth pro about this lens, its sharpness. This lens is pretty sharp and sharper than the Nikon 200 to 500 or the Sigma 150 to 600 across its zoom range. So this is a decently sharp lens. Next pro, you have decent focusing speed that you can get from this lens. Again, not as first party Nikon or Canon lenses, but decent enough to be, not cribbing. Now, points that are not so good about this lens. Price. This lens is not one of the cheapest lenses. At around over 90,000 on Amazon India, this lens is a bit on the expensive side. So, but with time, Tamron lenses just tend to get cheaper. So if you can wait for some time, this lens might just come down to around 80 to 85,000. The next con about this lens is this is an f5 to 6.3 lens. This is not the fastest lens that you can carry with you to the jungle. Even since Nikon 200 to 500 has better vibration reduction or image stabilization, that lens will give you at least 1 to 1.5 stops advantage shutter speed wise when compared to this lens. So those were the only two cons about the Tamron lens, and for me, I think Tamron 150 to 600 mm G2 lens is the best value for money zoom lens that you can buy for your wildlife ventures. So if this video has actually helped you decide better in buying your next zoom lens, do subscribe to our channel. This is Inu signing off. Have a great day ahead.